Welcome to the D&D Fitness Radio Podcast, brought to you by your hosts, Don Saladino from New York City and Derek Hansen from Vancouver, Canada. In episode 22, we speak with DEA Special Agent Agent Callery about the opioid epidemic in America. Let's get started. So, Don, I want to introduce to you my friend Agent Callery. Known John now, it's over 10 years now. Met him in Puerto Rico. We're both doing work with Benicio del Toro, and he's like the 6 degrees of separation of Benicio del Toro, right? So John is, I still have your card, John. Special agent. I love that. Like, I wish I could be a special agent in something, but special agent for the DEA, Drug Enforcement Agency. And again, this is a perfect example. I meet somebody very knowledgeable and very, very easy to talk to, great stories, great personality, great person. And so these are the types of people that people like Benicio del Toro surround himself with. And I get the benefit of meeting these people and having relationships. And I keep in touch with John quite frequently. We've probably seen each other in person maybe 3 times, but he's in Hawaii now, so I'm going to go visit him very soon. And maybe you can come.
Oh, lucky you! Lucky you! Is this a guy's trip?
We'll see. I might have to bring the family, but yeah, John, maybe you can start. Tell Don a bit about your background and how you got started in the law enforcement side and how that's evolved.
That'd be great.
Sure. Well, aloha, Derek and Don. It's the morning here. It's I think the afternoon where you guys are at. It's late afternoon in New York. But I'm jealous of you, Don. New York City is my favorite city in the world. So enjoy your time there. I love it.
It's a great city, and we can't appreciate that you're on right now. So thanks again for coming on and being willing to discuss with us.
Yeah, it's my pleasure, man. So I started DEA in 1992. I was hired in Washington, D.C. and immediately transferred to the City of Angels, Los Angeles. I was there for about 8 years. And then I was fortunate enough to get selected to go overseas, and I did 5 years as an agent in Bangkok, Thailand. After that, I transferred back to a section that we have called international training. So I spent 6 years, 3 as an agent and 3 as a supervisor in that part of DEA, going around the world, teaching, what we do, sharing our information. It's not as much teaching as it is sharing best practices. And we learn a lot from the countries that we go to, and I've been to about 75 countries and, over 1 million miles on United Airlines in those 6 years. So I was very rarely home. After that, I was selected as a position we call country attaché for Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, and I covered Kuala Lumpur and Singapore. And then after that, I went to Los Angeles, California again for 2 years as a supervisor. Then I was asked to go to DEA headquarters, which I did about a year ago. And there I was a section chief in charge of a section we call Office of Global Enforcement, Regional and Local Impact. And that bears witness to some of the stuff I'm going to talk about today, because in that position, I oversaw a lot of domestic operations in DEA, things that happen. By domestic, we mean things that happen in the 50 United States. And not many of our investigations stay there because, as you know, drugs, 90% of the drugs come from other countries. So most of our cases end up going to Mexico or Afghanistan or Colombia or wherever they go. But the cases that my people, myself and my outstanding folks at OGR, it's called, that we looked over, a lot of that in 2016, 17, a lot of that was opioid driven. A lot of that was heroin driven. A lot of that was an incredible amount of deaths. About 63,000 people died in 2016. That's attributable to drug overdoses, and the vast majority of those are opioid and heroin related. So I was able to really see that firsthand almost every day from the reports that were coming in, from around the country. And then fortunately enough, in August of 17, I was transferred out to Hawaii, and that's where I currently am, what's called the Assistant Special Agent in charge of the Hawaii District Office. And here I oversee Hawaii, all the islands here, Guam and Saipan. I have a phenomenal team here of agents and diversion investigators. So that's kind of up to date on, that's the short and skinny on where I am now.
How many people did you say died in 2016?
About 63,000. That's a CDC number. That's not a DEA number. That's a Center for Disease Control number. And the vast majority, you know, the numbers go back and forth, Don, you know, because statistics are easy to play with. But minimally about 40,000 of those were opioid-related deaths.
Wow. So, I mean, you know, times are changing now. I mean, I'm even, you know, hearing it, you know, specific high schools, you know, when we were in high school, I think the worst thing that you see going through was kids are smoking a joint, you know what I'm saying? And now it's gotten to become so much more hardcore that it's frightening for me.
Yeah.
Because I was never one. I mean, listen, as a little kid, you know, you have your fun here and there, you do some stupid stuff, but in comparison now to what children, literally, you know, 12, 13-year-old kids are doing, I can't believe they even have access to some of this stuff. I mean, but there's drugs they're all drugs, but there's like different, are there different levels of it now? I mean, is marijuana something you guys are really even heavily, you know, pursuing to, I mean, now there's specific states that CBD are legal in. Will THC ever become legal in these states? Now these painkillers are becoming really, this is heavy stuff out there. I mean, do you guys categorize them, or is it something where it's all in one pot?
Yeah, Don. So there is very strict categorization that DEA does. So there are Schedule 1, Schedule 2, Schedule 3, Schedule 4, et cetera. And the Schedule 1 drugs are the drugs that have zero medicinal use and are highly addictive. So Schedule 2 drugs that's where your opioids lay. Because, you know, obviously there's a medicinal use for opioids. There's a good use for them. They are outstanding painkillers, right, for people that need it. The problem and what's caused the quote unquote crisis in America in the opioid world is that those drugs are being diverted. And by diverted, I mean they're not going to the people that actually need them, or the people that need them are abusing them, and or there's illicit activity on the practitioner level, right? So that's the doctor level, the pharmacy level. You know, there's a lot of blame to go around, Don and Derek, a lot of blame.
So you know, you went through category, you called it right. Schedule 1 and Schedule 2.
Right.
So right. Schedule 1, if you don't mind, just so I have an understanding, that's crack, cocaine, heroin. I mean, pretty much
yeah, but not even cocaine, because cocaine's a 2 because of procaine. So it has a medicinal use, right? And this will shock you. So the most deadly drug that we're dealing with right now is fentanyl, right? And fentanyl is a synthetic opioid. It's synthetic morphine or synthetic heroin. And fentanyl alone is 30 to 50 times stronger than morphine. And then there's different analogs of fentanyl, like 15 to 20 or more than that. And one of those is called carfentanil. Now, carfentanil, you would think it's extremely deadly, right? A very, very, very small amount. And I mean, you know, 5 granules of salt that would, if it would go in your nose, would kill you. And here's why. That drug is used, though. It has a use, right? So Schedule 1 is the drug that has zero use, right? So that would, medicinal use, right? So that would be, like you said, crack, heroin. And controversially, marijuana is a Schedule 1 drug. And that's up for debate, obviously. Now, Schedule 2 would be fentanyl, right? And here's the interesting thing about fentanyl, because you say, oh my God, how can something so deadly not be Schedule 1? It has a medicinal use, and here's its use. It's used by veterinarians to knock out elephants and rhinoceros for surgery. So we have human beings mixing that with heroin and putting it in their veins, smoking it or snorting it.
You know,
and that's
wow.
you heard that 40,000 death rate, right?
Yeah.
That's where you get that from. Because now we have Mexican cartels mixing fentanyl into heroin to make more money on the heroin that they're bringing into the U.S.
Yeah, but if that's, I mean, such a small amount of fentanyl in the heroin is going to pretty much immediately kill someone, isn't it? I mean, why would the cartel put that into a drug? Sounds like a stupid question. I don't understand. Sorry about that, John.
If you dose it right, theoretically, if you dose it right, supposedly it's the best high you'll ever have. But there's a problem. There's a problem on the user end. So the euphoria, right, that a drug addict gets from cocaine or crack or heroin or meth or whatever it is, over time, as you know, if you've met any heroin addicts, over time, heroin addicts, they're not getting high anymore, right? They're just getting normal. So they're chasing that high. So if there was ever a chance that, oh my God, I could get high again like I did 5 years ago, and then they hear of this drug on the street, right? Let's say it's branded as Scorpion, right? Because when they sell heroin or they sell coke, they sell it in packets, and then they market that packet. And that packet may have, let's say, a scorpion stamped on it or a unicorn stamped on it. Once it goes around, let's use Baltimore as an example, because Baltimore has been crushed by this epidemic. Epidemic there, not an epidemic throughout the U.S. I think the word crisis is better than epidemic. But Baltimore-wise, let's say we have a heroin addict. Let's say, Don, you're a heroin addict, but you've only been a heroin addict for 2 years, and John's been a heroin addict for 8 years. So I look at you as a rookie heroin addict, right? Mm-hmm. And you look at me as some OG heroin addict. Well, I see you buy this Scorpion brand, and you stick it in your vein, and you die. To me, what does that say? That says, hey, that must be good stuff. Maybe I'll try that, and I can get high again. That's when you see 12, 15 bodies dropping on a Friday night in Baltimore, because It gets around, oh, this new Scorpion shit is fantastic. Let me try that. Well, here's the problem. These are heroin addicts. It's not heroin. It's fentanyl. So their body isn't, they're not built for that. They think they're big, tough heroin addicts, right? Because they shoot heroin every day, and their toxicity is so high, their ability to absorb, 8, 9% heroin, they think, wow, this is great. I might get high again. And they drop in a second.
Do they mix this? So this fentanyl, do they only mix it in heroin, or do they mix it in cocaine also? I mean, is it just, I don't really get how that works.
Don, that's a great question. And originally we at DEA and our outstanding local partners are out throughout the United States. DEA, we're a small agency. We're about 4,300 agents. So we use force multipliers. We have task force officers, especially in New York and Los Angeles and all the cities that we operate in. We have phenomenal partners in our police agencies. And talking to them and from our own data, that's a really good question, because here's the terrible answer. It originally started only being seen mixed in heroin. Now we're seeing it mixed in methamphetamine, cocaine. There's even reports that it was sprinkled on some marijuana in one of the parts of the country. I forget where it was. So, we have a great intelligence division here at DEA, and they're looking at that stuff every day. So the short answer is we've seen it in just about every drug. Why it would be in cocaine, why it would be in methamphetamine, that I can't answer that. But it has happened, and we see it growing. And here's the real scary part, right? And we can get into this later if you want, because I want to talk to you guys about, how in the hell did we get where we are now? How did we get to 40,000 people dropping dead of opioids when that wasn't a problem, 8, 9 years ago, 10, 6, 7 years ago? So I'll hit on that in a second, but one of the major issues that we're dealing with now are fake oxy pills, right? So the cartels on the other side of the border and on our side of the border have thought, hey, if these, middle-class Americans are willing to pay $30 or $40 for an opioid tablet, right, Oxycontin or whatever they're talking, fake, right? Why don't we make fake opioids? So what they're doing is they're taking, acetaminophen or Tylenol and crushing it up and dosing it with fentanyl and putting that on the streets as an opioid. So, they're not actually rocket scientists. I know people think they are, but they're not actually the chemists that we believe they are. So you may get, 5% fentanyl. I might get 15% by mistake, and you know exactly what's going to happen to the guy or lady that unfortunately buys the overdose amount. And here's something that also needs to be really noted, Derek and Don. Get this out of your mind that this is an inner city urban issue. It is not. This is a middle America, Midwest soccer mom, tennis mom issue, right? Because this issue is really born out of people that were overprescribed opioids in the beginning, right? And Derek and I have talked about this, the girl who goes and she's skating and she breaks her knee, she hurts her knee or she breaks her ankle, and she goes to a doctor, and that doctor is not trained in pain management and hands that person 90 opioid pills. And this is common. I can tell you 3 or 4 examples of people I personally know, even my family, that were given, 90 opioid a prescription for 90 days worth of opioids because they broke their ankle. Right. Obviously, that's being addressed, right? The AMA is looking at that, as a team, as a medical team, DEA, along with our partners in the medical community. That's obviously being looked at. But, here's what happens, guys. So that young lady, say she's 17, 18 years old, or whatever she is, 15 years old, she inadvertently becomes an opioid addict, right? By just taking it for 2 months. Now, when they take her off of it, she's basically, in some cases, not all cases, right? But in some cases, she's an opioid addict. And right. Opioid is basically a really nice way of saying heroin. Let's cut to the chase, right? It's still a morphine-based drug. It just looks better because you're not sticking it in your vein, you're swallowing it, and it looks medicinal. Mm-hmm. But, those pills are $20 to $30 on the street. So there's a huge market for the cartel and for drug dealers to sell it.
It's really crazy because, not just to give you a quick story, recently a friend of mine had to go in for some mouth surgery. Yeah. And he's been a recovering addict for 5 years. He's been 100% clean for 5 years, speaks for AA meetings, and he goes in for mouth surgery. And when he leaves there, they basically give him, a prescription drug to take. And he's trying to avoid taking it, but was in so much pain that he ended up taking it. And thank God he didn't go to the bar. Thank God he didn't go try and buy a bag or do the things that he used to do. But for a period of time, he said he was knocked out, and he really tussled for the next several weeks. People in AA meetings saying that, no, you're still on path, keep counting your days. Other people, no, you got to start over. And whatever the answer is completely irrelevant because he's doing great now. He used it as a learning curve. But what pissed me off about the whole situation is, why didn't our medical system, when you have an ex-addict going in there to sit down, why didn't they ask him that question? Why didn't they prepare him and say, listen, you're going to be in a lot of pain here. We want to keep our eyes on you for the next week. You should stay. We're opting for you to stay in here. We'll feed you. Why aren't they? But instead, you're taking an ex-addict, you're handing him or her drugs, and then throwing them on the streets. And I'm like, God damn, this could be a simple root canal or you slip and get stitches in your head and someone's got to hand you some, whatever I don't even know what these drugs are now. Is it still Vicodin and is it still Percodan? Are they still
get
stuff out? But for me, it upset me because I'm saying to myself, wow, you took someone who has been fighting for their life for the last 5 years. And because of a simple slip up of a mouth surgery, it could have been a freaking cavity that this guy got. He's prescribed a drug. And I wanted to get your opinion on that.
Yeah, and here's the deal, guys. 99.9% of the doctors out there do the right thing every day. Not just doctors, veterinarians. We call them practitioners, right? And there's about 1.7 million practitioners in the U.S. So if 99% of them do the right thing every day, which they do, right? What's 1% of 1.7 million?
That's a lot.
1% are doing something wrong, right? Let's say it's half of that. Let's say it's 0.5%, right? What is that number? That's an enormous number, right? And that's where we come in. That's where DEA comes in. We have a phenomenal division in DEA. It's called diversion. And there are things, they have a separate academy than the agents go to. It's a diversion investigator. They're called DIs. We're SAs, special agents. They're diversion investigators. And they've become a huge part of DEA, and their responsibility is to prevent, detect, and investigate, controlled substances via pharmacies, doctors, distributors. And when you see these investigations against doctors, yeah, those are DEA special agents doing them, but for the most part, those are diversion investigators, and they have an expertise in what you're talking about, right? So here's what we do. So you and the public has a better grasp of how this works. We monitor doctors. We monitor drug companies. We monitor pharmacies. There's data out there. It's all statistic driven, right? And we look at the ones that are the high flyers, right? The ones that are way off the charts. And how come that doctor is distributing, 400% more than everybody else in his or her community? And we look at those doctors and we investigate them and we look into them. And you all should know that as we speak right now, there are undercover investigations going on against doctors, against physician's assistants, against pharmacists, against any practitioner, veterinarians, and there are hundreds, if not thousands, going on as we speak. So, Don, I know that doesn't, satisfy that answer, but we're 100% aware of that. And unfortunately, when you look at that 43,000 number, right, those are the people we're talking about, right? Those are the people that should have been identified as critical, and a real doctor, right, would be asking those questions. Do you have a substance abuse problem? Have you ever had an addiction problem? And they're sure as hell not going to give that person Vicodin, Percocet, or Oxy. That's absolutely not going to happen.
Yeah, it starts coming down to the question too: if someone's in that much pain, what do you give them? And this is something I can't answer, and I don't even know if you can answer. I mean, I know you're not a doctor, but someone goes in and gets a surgery. There is something to be said about, imagine if we didn't have painkillers. Someone's got to sit there in agony for the next week or two, and the damage that can cause on the human body and the system, and how it can actually, prolong healing and all this bad stuff. And, would now, is marijuana starting to be looked at and we're starting to see the legalization of it? 10 years ago, you wouldn't have even, had that conversation. And now you're looking at all these states where people can get licenses, and you see all these companies, these legal marijuana companies that are almost becoming public on the stock exchange now, and they're becoming business. People are investing into, I know a company called Kronos, Lord Jones, these companies that are, CBD, and it's legal, and everything they're doing is legal. But do you almost agree that maybe I can't ask you your opinion on this, but what's going around? Are people saying this is a much safer alternative to be able to work as? I mean, think about it. You look at a joint, and then you look at a Percocet. What's safer here? I know my opinion, but I wanted to get yours if that was possible.
Yeah, and that's obviously a very hot topic in June of 2018, and it will probably continue until June of 19 and June of 20. And there's a lot of debate on the Hill about this. Here's my stance from DEA, right? We are a part of the executive branch of the United States government, so we execute laws, right? The legislative branch makes those laws. People dictate to their congresspersons, their congress members, what they want those laws to be. And if and when those laws are changed, then we will change our enforcement actions, right? And our enforcement stance. As of right now, as of, whatever it is, June 15th, 2018, federally, it's illegal. It would be silly for me to tell you that, we're going to chase somebody down the street with a joint in their hand. That's absolutely not happening. But in bulk amounts and in areas of the country where it is illegal, which is everywhere as far as DEA is concerned in June of 2018, we're doing those cases. I've heard that debate. I haven't heard enough to be educated to speak on it as far as marijuana supplementing, Oxycontin or opioids in that vein. But here's what I will say. Here's something I've been saying. I've been going all over Hawaii and speaking about the opioid subject. And here's what I will say. As you said earlier in the podcast, right, marijuana is not what it was when I was in high school. And I'm older than you, so I'm going back to the late 70s, early 80s. And I went to high school in Florida. So trust me, it was around. Actually, there was talk about, that the cool kids have Coke, and that's ridiculous. But that was Florida in the 80s, right? And as you said, I was, back then there was the dichotomy of the jocks and the freaks, right? You were a jock or a freak. And I was a jock. I was in the jock, clan. So that's kind of where I stood, and I never tried it, and I never cared to try it. But here's what I will say. When you start talking about marijuana legalization in 2018, I think my personal opinion is we need to be very careful when we use the word marijuana, because marijuana in your mind and in my mind has a different idea of what marijuana is in 2018. And what I'll speak to is the THC levels in marijuana and in honey oil, butane honey oil, right, which is an extract of marijuana. So back in the day, right, in the early 80s or mid 80s, THC in the weed that people were smoking then was 4 or 5%. BC Bud was 6-7%. Maui Wowie funny enough, but I'm going to Maui next week, was one of the great marijuanas to get a hold of, and very exotic. And oh my God, you can get that from Hawaii. Now listen, guys, you're talking about butane honey oil that has THC in the 50, 60, 70 percentile. That is off the charts. And the toxicity of that THC is enormous as well. It causes psychosis. People are overdosing from it. Now, that BHO honey oil, all of that is getting wrapped in marijuana. When you say legalize marijuana, there's nothing in those laws that say, oh, there's a difference. It's a broad swath that you're saying is legal, right? So if we are going to legalize marijuana as a country, I just want the people that are voting on that to realize when you're voting for legalizing marijuana, what you're opening that up to, because you're opening up to all levels of THC. In my understanding of the laws that are written, nothing in there says, oh, but only up to 8% THC. None of that.
Yeah, but what if the governing bodies, what if our government puts limits on that to where we can protect and package, almost like look at the cigarette companies now.
Yep.
Like you're seeing, I see someone smoking a cigarette on the street, and you're almost looking at them like, what the hell is this? Like, people still smoke? Like, you almost laugh about it.
Yeah.
25 years ago, I remember being away and people were buying packs of cigarettes, and I just hardly see it done anymore. I don't even know what a pack of cigarettes costs anymore, but
it's enormous, bro. I was just looking the other day. I want to say it's like $7 or $8 a pack.
Is it? That's
it's all tax. I think it's all tax.
I don't even know. It might even be a lot more than in New York. But my thing is what if the U.S. government, and they figured out a way to package this and govern it so we know what's going on it, to where I don't know. I mean, it scares me that this stuff's – first off, it scares me that this stuff's even in our circulation, because you, obviously, coming from you right now, you have no idea what you're consuming. And if someone's at a party and they think they're just doing something simple like a line of Coke, it could be laced with something that could immediately kill you. That's scary stuff. Like, that will take someone who's going to go do it recreationally a couple times a year. That would enable them to never want to do it again. But if this stuff was like protected and packaged to where it wasn't coming from Colombia, and you weren't relying on some, goofball, what the hell do they know what they're lacing it with? And then it's crossing our border. To me, that seems even more dangerous. I don't know. I don't know if you have an opinion on that.
Don, it's a very complex, very touchy subject, especially for us, at DEA. I'll say this, right? There's a huge lobby out there, on K Street in Washington, that's pushing this marijuana legalization. And I think their facts may be a little skewed, because remember what their goal is. Their goal is to pass this for the companies, like companies that you named, right, to legitimatize this and legalize it, because there is literally a fortune to be made here, right? It's almost first in is the winner, right? Because if you can get the patent and you can get the government to agree to your patent, or like you said, some kind of structure to how it's manufactured, and there's the whole thing of pesticides, et cetera, and all that needs to be worked out. But where we stand in June of 2018, as far as marijuana as a substitute for opioids, that's a discussion to be had. And that's a discussion to be had in the same realm as medical marijuana, right? Because there are specific uses for it, right? That's what we were told, that it's for glaucoma, it's for people with cancer because they lose their appetite, or people that are on chemotherapy, et cetera. But you and I both know that that's been bastardized to the fullest. I have friends of mine that I grew up with from New York and New Jersey, and Florida, especially New York, specifically an island off of Long Island, that, have their medical marijuana cards, and there isn't a damn thing wrong with them. So, they found a way around it. And that hurts the cause, in my opinion, right? Because now, really, you've taken it away from the people. You've taken the cause away. People have said, oh, I need this because of A, B, and C. Now you have people obviously cheating the system, that there's not a damn thing wrong with them. They just want to be able to buy, marijuana legally and come up with a card fictitiously. But the thing that isn't really understood is it's not DEA agents that sit on a board somewhere and say what's legal and what isn't legal.
Right.
Doctors, we bring in professional doctors, right? Esteemed doctors that sit on a panel for DEA and for the FDA and say, there's no need to make this legal. It's not us. You know, it is us, but it's not us. I don't.
You're the ones who have to.
I'm being honest with you.
You're the ones who have to enforce the law.
Exactly.
So basically what's going to happen is tomorrow, if they turned around to you and they said cocaine is legal, whether you agree with it or not, you guys have to respect the law and you guys have to do the job that you're out there to do, correct?
As we would say, 10-4.
Yeah. Can I ask a question, John?
Sure, brother.
Now, we talked about opioids. Other prescription meds, are they a problem? Like I watched this Netflix thing on Adderall and how, people are using it for studying and work and, exercise and all that. Is that a problem in your mind? Is that becoming something that's on the radar for you?
Derek, it's not becoming. It has been for a long time, right?
Yeah.
The misuse of any prescription is an issue. And that's where, like I said, here in Hawaii, I'll just use Hawaii as an example. I think we're pretty fortunate because I've been able to get around and speak to probably 1,000 people at this point. And a lot of those have been in the medical community, a lot of doctors, a lot of nurses. And I've given them, my 1.5 hour, 2 hour speech on the opioid crisis, epidemic, opioid awareness, however you want to call it. And what I've seen is a lot of open mouths like, oh my God, is that really happening? Because it really hasn't hit Hawaii yet. Where it's been devastating, right? It's been devastating in Ohio and in Pennsylvania and West Virginia. And I'll give you some statistics later on about West Virginia that'll knock, it's a good thing you're sitting down because it'll knock you out of your seats. So the cool thing that I'm seeing is there's a huge buy-in from the medical community with DEA and with the local enforcement agencies to do the right thing, right? So here in Hawaii, I'll give you an example. The doctors have kind of gotten together and decided that they're only going to prescribe opioids for 7 days, and then there will be no refill. You'll have to come back to them for a refill. And like Don was saying, okay, there are people out there that are in pain, and we're not saying that they should not be getting this medication, especially people, right, in the end of life, right, that are in hospice care. Fentanyl is a perfect drug for those people. But it's not a perfect drug for the 19-year-old kid walking down the street that just wants to get high. But in Hawaii, they've done a great job of coming together as a team, as a medical community, and said, okay, we're not going to allow what happened in West Virginia to happen here. And I champion that, and I applaud them for that. But getting back to your point, Derek, yeah, man, Adderall, Percocet, Percodan, Vicodin, all those drugs, they've been abused for 20 or 30 years. My aunt had a problem. I was a kid at the time, but my aunt, I remember, my mom talking about, that my aunt, and I won't name her name, just like you, Don. I'll just be quiet about that. She was probably a Vicodin addict, but I didn't know what it was. I remember seeing the pills with a little V in them because Vicodin, it has that cute little V in it. I remember seeing those, and I remember stories about her hiding them around the house, and my mom would have to go around and find them. Now, that's 1981. We're in 2018, right? So the problem goes way, way back, right? So whenever there's a drug, whenever there's something that makes you feel better than your current status, people are going to shoot for that, right? And Adderall, right, it starts in high school, right? It starts with kids that it makes them study better, right? But then really, are we having doctors? And I'm just going to, I don't mean to get off track, but we're giving drugs to a kid to study better? I mean, what happens how long is that going to go on? Is that going to go on through medical school? I mean, you know what I mean? I just don't get that. But yeah, and I'm not a doctor, like you said, Don, thank you very much for that, because you're absolutely correct. And I don't want to get, ahead of my skis here. I'm just looking at from a personal, I don't have any kids, but if I had a kid, and the doctor told me we're going to give your kid Adderall so they can study better, I think I'm going for a second opinion on that.
Yeah, I agree.
But maybe there's a reason for it. Maybe in some cases, with, attention deficit disorder, maybe it is a thing. Maybe it works.
Right.
But it's abused. It's absolutely abused.
It's tough. We really don't know. We really don't know the long-term effects of a lot of things. And I think now, not to switch topics, but you start getting into that hormone replacement therapy. I mean, I'm in fitness. I've been in fitness.
Right.
I've been in fitness for 20 years. I lost one of my best friends in 2010, who was probably, I'd say about 12, 13 years older than me. He would have been in his early 50s. But he got on testosterone at a very young age. And I remember it was a long process because I knew him for about, it might have been 99, he passed away. So I knew him for about 11 years. We worked out together almost every day. And he was on testosterone. And what happened was he got put on it because he had low T. And I remember watching the whole process and just watching all the times he's like, oh, well, I'm getting off it and I feel terrible. So here's a guy now, he never really had any guidance. He'd get on testosterone by himself, or by the doctor, whatever it was. And he would get off of it and feel like complete garbage. And I'd find him in the back of my gym just laying there breathing. And make a long story short, it caught up on him. I found him dead in his apartment back in 2010. We went in, they had to do an autopsy. We had bloods done, I think a couple months before he died. And in those bloods, we found that his testosterone, I think, was north of 3,000. At the time, as a natural fitness person, I was north of, say, 700, which was very, very good. 3,000. But there was a dependency there. So now this guy is relying on it to not only feel good, but to look a specific way. And you don't hear people talk much about this anymore. But I see guys on magazine covers. I see, fortunately, none of the actors that I work with, but I see celebrities who other trainers I know train that have to get ready for a movie role, and they're pumping this stuff into their body, and they're giving off this false perception. And now a kid wants to start working out. They follow a workout regimen, and they're not seeing the same results. And I personally think it's disgusting because you're giving this false perception, this false hope to someone who just doesn't know any better. And then you see these kids revert to something because they just want it so bad. They want to look like the guy on that magazine cover. And how big of, is that still big in your industry? Is that still something that you guys keep your eye on, or are you really dealing? I mean, obviously this whole opioid epidemic right now seems like the absolute biggest thing that you guys are trying to focus on. But is this hormone replacement therapy, these doctors now prescribing and assigning growth hormone, testosterone to people with low T in their mid-30s. We don't know what this is going to do long term. Do you follow?
Yeah, another great question. You guys are awesome with the questions. So, it's funny you said that. On the way in, driving in today, I heard at least 2, it might have been 3 commercials, with the tagline of, hey, are you over 40? Are you feeling sluggish? Is your wife complaining? Do you wish you still look like you did? That's the thing, right? And so, of course, I'm over 40, so it got my attention. Like, oh, what are we doing? And it was exactly that, right? It was a doctor or a medical, some kind of medicine distributor, right? Pushing some testosterone pills or you guys know what that is, So here's my answer to that, Don. We are not singly focused, right? We're not a large agency, but we have great task force and we have great diversion investigators. So just because we're very focused on the opioid thing on the diversion side of the house, we're just as focused on methamphetamine, heroin, cocaine. Used to be crack. Thankfully, crack has kind of has gotten off the streets a little bit. It's still around, but we're still focused on the big 5 or the big 6 or whatever you want to say. The opioids thing is just another thing that we have to work on and focus on. But we also haven't walked away from the steroid thing. Where I sit in Hawaii right now, I got briefed yesterday on 2 ongoing steroid cases that we're doing here. And the steroids are coming out of the Philippines and they're coming out of China. So here's the scary part, Don, that you're not going to want to hear. It is 1,000 times easier to get those drugs now because of the dark web. So all you need is a Bitcoin account and a post office box. No questions are asked. If you got on the dark web right now and put, I want to buy testosterone in Google, you'll get 30 hits, and it's going to ask you what's your Bitcoin account number or, whatever your virtual currency is. And it's going to ask you what the address is. And depending on where you live, it'll arrive in your doorstep within a week. And no one is going to know the better. It is out of control. Not only is it steroids, people are buying cocaine, methamphetamine, heroin, and especially that's how fentanyl is coming to the U.S. It's coming from China, either through Mexico or directly from China in the mail. Right. And I know nobody wants to hear that, but those are the facts.
That to me, that's
unfortunately, you'll see, you're going to see way more of this in the gyms, right? It's not that dude that works in the back of GNC anymore, right? And I'm not disparaging GNC, but I remember when I was a kid, there was a guy that worked in the back, that he would meet you in back of the GNC and hand you stuff. That was what I heard at the gym. You don't need that dude anymore. That dude's out of business because
it's scary. It's scary.
That'll do it for you.
It's scary though. If you're placing an illegal order, basically on the web, which is illegal, I mean, they could be sending you insulin. You have no idea what they could be sending you. They could be sending you baking soda powder. Like there's no clue. And like that itself should scare people enough to be like, don't even go there. And that's so idiotic to me that people would even go to the dark web because you literally do not know. You could be buying some form of candy in a liquid and injecting that in you have no clue what you're buying. What scares me the most is that young people are being advised by their doctors. You have low T. I can prescribe this to you. It's safe. Hormone replacement therapy. I get there's a lot of money to be made, but the human body, I can tell everyone one thing, you do not know how the body's going to respond. I can get on something and be fine for the next 20 years of my life. Someone else can get on the same dosage and they could have some type of cancerous cell in their body that no one knows about it that could multiply tenfold by what they're putting into their body. But the fact that doctors, people who have gone to medical school are still pushing this stuff in a very lenient manner really scares the shit out of me.
Well, what's the DEA's mandate, John, in terms of like just educating the public so that they can protect themselves, even if they have a doctor that's somewhat shady? Like, how do you teach people to protect themselves in all these cases?
Derek, one of the ways we do that is what I'm doing right now, right? I'm on with you, and I'm hoping this gets out to 1 million people or how many followers you have, 10 million, whatever you guys are knocking down nowadays. It's all about education, guys. I mean, counterterrorism is all about education, right? It's educating people that there's a better way. Counter drugs is all about education. If you can say kind of we lost a generation here or there, right? In the 70s and the 80s. And those people hopefully told their kids, hey, man, don't make the mistakes I made. But we're in the middle of that right now, right? We're at the beginning of that fight, that dark web fight. And Don, this will piss you off even more, my man. But what happens is some of those websites are incredibly legitimate when it comes to the drugs. So what you'll see is when you get on that website, there will be testimonials from somebody in New York that some kid in Atlanta is reading and said, it was great shit. You got to try this guy.
That's incredible.
I'm telling you, get on. If I were you, I'd go to some, anonymous place because, some people may be tracking those websites and who's getting on them. We'll just leave it at that. But get on one and educate yourself and just Google, I don't know where the hell you can do that now that nobody knows who you are. Yeah. But just Google, I want to buy testosterone and watch what the hell happens.
It'll backfire.
It's not going to be
it'll backfire on me.
Yeah.
I can't do it. It'll end up backfiring on me. Someone will track it. Then suddenly everyone will think that I'm on it.
Well, do this. Take my word for it. Yeah, it's like Craigslist, right? It's an incredibly illicit form of Craigslist, and or Amazon, right, where you get to leave. Oh, this product was great. You'll see 50 people saying this was great. Buy from this guy.
John used the word, and it was education. And one area that I think there's been a big improvement on, and maybe I'm completely off here, but I think I'm noticing it because of my nieces and my nephews and my kids, is drinking and driving. So and with Ubers now and all this stuff going on, I was actually impressed with my nieces and nephews because, when we're, back in the, decades ago, you hear stories, people are jumping in cars, they have a couple of drinks in them. I'm not a drinker. Once in a while, I might go out and have a drink. But I even see my kids that if they see someone having a drink and they see them, they'll be like, you had one drink. You shouldn't, like, this is your second drink. One of my kids said it to me one night. I remember I had 2 drinks and like, Dad, you know you can't drive now, right? And I looked at him and I started laughing and I'm like, I'm so happy you said that. Right, I'm not going to drive. And my nieces and nephews, the same thing. I'm like, how are you getting there? Oh, we're all taking Uber. And it was incredible. The education that they got on drinking and driving wasn't the education that my class or a decade below me was getting on drinking and driving. And I feel like because they started at a young age and they literally scared the shit out of my nephews, my nieces, what's going to be my children, they're so petrified about this. I think this is a terrifying story that you're giving me about something that even marijuana that could be laced with specific things, or cocaine, which was just, your total party drug of the 80s. People going out, you hear blowing a couple of lines at the Roxy in the 70s, and it was harmless and fun. And now hearing it that it could be laced with rat tranquilizers, and you're hearing about drugs called Special K and all this crazy stuff out there that could kill you instantaneously. If you start showing cases of that to children, they're going to think, I mean, there's got to be a level. You're not going to show it to a 5-year-old, but, you start showing it to kids in, 10th grade, 11th grade. I'm sorry, 10 years old. My daughter's 10. She's old enough to see this stuff now. Start educating them at a young age, beat it into their head for the next 5, 6, 7 years until they go to college. And I think our success rates are going to go up.
Agree 100%. And, and speaking of kids, right? I mean, there's companies, illicit companies out there that are marketing cannabinoids, right? And if you look at the marketing for that, it's specifically targeted at 10 to 12-year-old kids, right? And the synthetic marijuana, we have seized, tons of it throughout the country. A lot of it is incredibly toxic. I mean, God knows what's being put in there. And people, have brain damage immediately from trying it. There's when I was in Malaysia, there was a party that a couple kids went to, and 3 of them smoked some spice. 2 kids died and 2 have brain damage permanently. They took about 2 or 3 hits from this supposed joint, and they got that spice from China. So these aren't fairy tales, man. This isn't the skies falling. This is absolutely true. And what you said, Don, is right on, man. It's all about education. And, you remember back in the day, it was like sex education started in like 8th grade. And then somebody said we should do it in 5th grade. And people freaked out like, oh, my God, don't teach them about sex. Well, Jesus Christ, look at the internet. You can get on right now and see anything you want at age 7. So I don't think there's any too early. I would say kindergarten is the time to start with. Don't go in mommy's prescriptions. If you find a thing, bring it to mommy. You know what I mean?
Right. I'm a believer in that. I'm a believer that we shouldn't be coddling our children and we should be educating them and teaching them how to respect things. I never had a drinking problem. And I think it was because, times have changed. But at a young age, my parents understood that if I had a drink, they were fine with it. And if they had to hold on to the car keys, and as long as I respected it, and my friends came over, that stuff nowadays, it's frowned upon. But I don't know. I went off to college and I actually went in the reverse direction. I drank less. It's like I got more to my fitness, more to my body, and go figure, I'm a fitness professional now. So yet I saw kids in high school, parents were so on top of them about getting the best grades on the planet and never being able to go to a party. And, they're going off to Ivy League schools and they're flunking out. What's the point of my story here? I'm saying that, moderation, I get it. Educate our children at a very young age. Let's teach them to respect that this is a real thing out there. And God forbid, when they are offered it and when they are exposed to it, because it's going to happen, they know how to handle the situation.
Exactly. And let me hit on something. Since you talked about, and that's a really good point, right, about alcohol abuse and drunk driving. And there's something to be said there, because there's an unseen force that helped curb that as well. And it wasn't a government entity, right? It was MAD. It was Mothers Against Drunk Drivers, which started in Maryland. I went to University of Maryland. Go Terps. Yeah. So I'm very aware of MAD because, we heard a lot about it in Maryland. So here's the interesting thing about MAD. You're talking about a bunch of pissed off moms, right? Which I can see in the very near future when it comes to the opioid epidemic. You have a lot of pissed off moms and dads right now. And what they did is they put their money together and they went to police agencies. And I don't know if you guys are aware of how this worked. They paid overtime for police officers. So there would be on a Friday night, instead of 6 cruisers, there would be 9 cruisers. And they were paying for the overtime. But 3 of those cruisers, all they were doing was pulling people over for DWI, right? Because the police departments were like, listen, we only have 6 cruisers. 5 of them are going to calls and one of them's on alert or on patrol. We can't afford to keep pulling people over. Well, an outside of government entity walked in and said, oh, we can help that. So I don't think that's a problem either when it comes to education. If people want to put their efforts forward with education, and we have some brilliant people out there, right? We need to get doctors to stand up and say, hey, this is dead wrong. It can't just be DEA and police officers out there saying this is wrong. We need to get, the medical community, and I've seen it, I know it's going on around the United States, but we need to get them engaged in this to tell people the dangers of this. And we need to really get it out there about the dark web, because, it's kind of like the quintessential, 400-pound, 14-year-old kid with a Mountain Dew bottle in his basement. He's the only one that knows about the dark web. That's not true. A 13-year-old kid in Poughkeepsie knows about the dark web, and their parents don't know a damn thing about it, but they know everything about it.
Okay, I'm going to ask you something that's your expertise too, John. How do you think this stuff is depicted in Hollywood? Where's that going? Well,
Ben and I have had many, many conversations about that. It's sexy, right? It sells. I often, when I do presentations, I tell people DEA, and I'm like, Drug Enforcement Administration, the bad guy in every movie. We're always the bad guy, or, at the end of the movie, the guy that was corrupt was the DEA guy. And obviously that's fantasy too, right? So, obviously there's a whole lot to this, right? It's not just a drug issue, it's the violence issue, right? And we could talk for days about that. The one thing that I would say that I'm a huge proponent of or against are violent video games, right? It's not, look at like Grand Theft Auto, right? I think they're on like Grand Theft Auto 6 or 7, right? You're talking about a game that you get extra points for buying drugs from a dude and not paying him and killing him when he turns his back, and or killing the cop, or having sex with a hooker and killing her afterwards so you get extra points. That's reality. That's what kids is going in their brains. So it's not just movies I'm more worried about, Derek. I'm more worried about the video games, because kids aren't watching movies like we did when we were kids. Kids are locked into video games. This is that whole world out there. What's that one video game that like the NBA players are doing? I forget what it's called. It's like, you're building some world, and they're spending, people are spending 8, 9, 10 hours a day in this video game to get to a level in this alternate universe that they're somebody in, right? Because they're not somebody in their mind where they are. Right. So not as much movies as concerns me, to be honest with you. It's video games. Because kids are in video games. They're not watching movies like you and I did. They're on Netflix, or they're on Amazon, or they're, a lot of their whole world is revolved around video games. And there's very, very little oversight, right? You can't tell me there's oversight if you get an extra 100 points for killing a cop. That's a good thing now.
Yeah, it's insane. I actually, it's ironic. I mean, I feel victim to it. I mean, I was never a gamer, but my son's doesn't play a lot, but he has GT5, Grand Theft Auto 5, and he plays it and he gets a kick out of it. Fortunately, he's not glued to it, but I never even thought of that message. And now I'm thinking about it, like, how is that even allowed?
Don, go home and watch it, bro. Yeah. Play it with him for 20 minutes.
It was funny. Who is it? The rapper Ice-T years ago wrote that song called Cop Killer. Remember it?
Yeah.
And he put it out and he got destroyed. But I think they actually made him take the song off the air. There was some type of legal dispute.
Yeah.
And if that wasn't allowed then, I don't understand why this is allowed now. It doesn't make sense. Why does that message have to be there? Why does it have to be where the kids are buying drugs? Why can't it be that they're buying something else? Guns, fine. I mean, I don't know. Maybe that's not as good, but like, you know, listen, I used to play duck hunt on Nintendo Brothers. You had a gun and you're shooting a duck. It's like, that was innocent. Like nowadays, like it's such on a different level. And I just don't understand. It's not the kid's fault.
Right.
But who's allowing that? That's our government, right? Correct? Because if our government didn't like it, they would put the kibosh on it and say, no, there's a law now stating that is a poor message. So, I mean,
but you know what happens with that, Don? Not to interrupt. What happens with that is when you do that, you make it sexier, right? That's like the whole, you know, Vice President Gore's wife. Remember back in the 80s or the early 90s when they started putting labels on rap music, and that made, you know, the white upper class, middle class kid from Long Island, oh, I got to have that because the government said I can't have it. Now I need it. So it drove, you know, it made Public Enemy and you know, NWA, it made them millions because somebody said, don't listen to this.
Don's from Long Island.
Yeah, I saw that in his background there.
And I think I was listening to NWA probably sometimes.
Two Live Crew.
Wow, I feel like we can keep going on and on and on right now. I mean, you're some incredible points. So what is your? I mean, you've gotten involved in this industry because you are trying to make a difference, just like Derek and I. You know, we get involved. You know, fortunately, we all want to make money in life, but you got involved in this because there's a part of you that feels like you can make that change.
Yeah,
you have a priority in the back of your head where level. I mean, listen, you just went through and you categorized different drugs for us, and I think different people would say where the level of importance should go to. What is scaring you the most? What is the number one change that if you could snap your fingers right now and make, what would it be?
That's a great question. You know, it's inevitable. Here's my theory, right? So, you know, 3 or 4 years ago and up till today, you know, when a drug dealer did a drug deal, it was, you know, meet me in the parking lot of Target and I'll bring the 5,000, you know, you bring the, you know, pound of meth and we'll do the exchange and then you hand it to me and I'll hand you the money and then we'll separate, right? And when we would do that, we would do the exact same thing with undercover officers or undercover police officers or agents. So that's, you know, that's the way it worked. That's how we played the game. The game has completely changed now. And my guess would be in the next 4 or 5 years, that'll never happen again. What'll happen is you'll get on the internet, you'll make an order, it'll arrive at your house or at a post office box, and it'll all be done through virtual currency. So, you know, part of our job, right, in the federal government and DEA and FBI and everywhere is to not just look at today, right? It's to look at the future. So where are we, right? So if I had to snap my finger, Don, what I would do is I would try to hire the youngest and brightest people we can that understand the internet, that understand computer sciences. It's the whole, I need a guy that can work the streets. Yeah, we're still going to need that. But we need to be smarter than the bad guys, right? Furthermore, we need the backing. So the snap the finger thing would be a law that would immediately be able to put those websites out of business and off the internet. And, you know, we tangle with businesses on this, right? We tangle with Yahoo and Google by asking them, hey, man, these are illegal sites. Can you take them down? And we go back and forth because I see their side of it too, right? There's a legitimate side to them that says, hey, this is a business. We're not in the law enforcement world. It's your job to arrest these people or put them out of business. But I think we're probably getting to the point sooner or later, like you said, right? As far as video games are concerned, as far as content on television, as far as content in the movies, sooner or later, people are going to have enough, right? Like the high school kids in the shooting there, they got a lot of gravitas, right? In them stepping up and saying, hey, you know, we're against guns, gun control, et cetera, et cetera. I think it's going to take a village to fix this issue. But if you said to me one thing we can immediately change, it would be the ability to shut down websites for cause that would happen in a minute. And we don't have that right now.
You know, it's unfortunate. It's like anything else. I was talking to a friend of mine who is in marketing, and she works for a big marketing firm. And we were talking about social media, and I was asking questions about, well, what are they doing from a marketing standpoint? And she's telling me, yeah, it's funny. Here's this powerhouse, and they're still in the print, and they really haven't gotten into the digital that much. And I'm like, looking at myself going, why? And the reality is that, you know, you get a lot of these, you know, this old guard and these people who became extremely successful for years doing it a specific way. And that's the only way that they know. And right now, all my digital help's coming from a company that shares a floor with me, these guys from Jerry Media. And they're all young kids. And you go in.
I see him in the background.
Yeah, and I'm
flipping you off in the background back there.
Exactly. But here I am. I'm 41 years old, and I'm going down sitting with guys that are 26, 27, 28, and my jaw's hanging on the floor. And they're basically building my business for me right now. And you're absolutely right. I think a lot of it comes down to us understanding there are things that we're good at, and the areas now that we have to start going to make this successful. We got to start relying on some of the youth who truly understands how to go and track this sort of thing. And I'm almost shocked that we're not doing it yet. It's a huge disappointment to me, as it is probably to you.
Yeah, because I heard, John, that organized crime is hiring these type of cyber people. Like, you know, we got to get these guys to do the computer stuff for us. So
that was 20 years ago, bro.
Yeah.
A long time ago. You know, they're always ahead of the curve. Obviously, we're always playing catch up, right? It's like, you know, it's like a cat chasing a mouse around, and the mouse is way, way faster than we are because they're agile. It takes a long time for us to change. You know, changing law enforcement, where law enforcement's going is like, you know, somebody jumped off of a cruise ship and you got to turn around to go get them.
Right.
You take 10 miles by the time you get back. And that's what it takes, because it has to go through legislation. It has to go through Congress. And, you know, hitting on what you said, Don, you know, a perfect example of that, you know, I think we're hiring guys and ladies, outstanding people at DEA, you know, young, energetic people. They're trying to do the right thing. They're hyper intelligent, hyper educated. You know, they're 25, 26 years old. I'm 53. And, you know, sometimes they say stuff and I'm like, what the heck? But I realize, okay, that makes a lot of sense. But then, you know, think about Zuckerberg when he just went in front of the Congress, right? And there were probably 1 million people in Silicon Valley giggling at the questions that 70-year-old congressmen and senators were asking him, and he's looking at them like, what are you talking about? And it came off as him being cocky, but they were basically talking a different language. They may have been speaking Swahili to him because the questions they were asking were so low level to where his mind is, where Facebook needs to be, right? And I'm not on either side of that. I watched it, actually. It was on C-SPAN. I was watching in my office, and it was like people from two different planets talking to each other. And like you said, we have to embrace that. You know, we can't push that away and say, oh, that's just young kids talking. No, that's reality. That's where we are now. You know, what percentage of communication is happening on Twitter and Facebook? What percentage of people get their news from Twitter, Facebook, and you know, whatever, Reddit? It's probably below 30, 90%.
You know,
below 30, right? 90%. Nobody buys the freaking New York Times anymore.
You know, it's amazing. It's to see even my marketing message that the sweet spot right now is between 7 and 22 seconds. So I have to get my message across, and sometimes it's longer because my message is longer and you cough it up. But you see something called dwell time, and the dwell time between 7 and 20 seconds means the amount of time that people will dwell and stay on that video. After 22 seconds for me, I'll see a 75% dip of followers. So it's like, get your message across in that period of time. That's not something I ever knew about until this last year. And I'm not expecting someone, in Congress to understand that. We have to start going to our youth a little bit more. And I think we have to take a different approach. My last question today, and Derek, if you got another one fired off, and John, I can't be any more appreciative of your time. And this is definitely hands down.
No, it's great, man.
One of my favorite guests we've ever had on is got to be, is you, hands down. This has been incredible. But we did not talk about the correlation between drugs and violence.
Yeah.
what have you seen in a nutshell? Is that something that's really, is it on the rise? Is it on the decline because people are buying drugs on the web now? Is it making that exchange, is it much safer now? Because you're not a stranger going, it sounds like a dumb question, but you're not a stranger showing up into the parking lot of Target, sitting in a drug dealer's car. I mean, that's pretty damn stupid if you ask me.
Right.
But are we seeing that on the decline, or is that still kind of up and healthy?
You know, I will push you to Google shootings in Chicago. I want to say, and this is, I don't want to be grandiose when I say this, but I heard a number, it was maybe last weekend or the weekend before that there were 76 individual shootings in over a Friday, Saturday night in the city of Chicago.
Oh, God.
So it is absolutely not going down. And Don and Derek, that's a direct correlation. When you see violence in the drug world, that's all about turf, right? So you'll see that, you know, what Ben's portraying in Sicario and upcoming Soldado, which I was fortunate enough to help Ben with on both of those. That's all reality, man. I mean, what you see in Juarez, what you see on that side of the border, that's all about control, right? So without getting into a big, long discussion, the cartels have it broken down into sectors of Mexico and plazas, right? And plazas are smaller than the sectors. And to be a plaza boss means you're in charge of an area, right? Of a distribution area. And a lot of those distribution areas, they have corresponding distribution cities, right? So let's say, you know, Sector A of Mexico supplies Chicago. When somebody tries to push into Chicago, a different sector of Mexican cartels, right? Or just straight up gang members, they're going to fight for that territory because they've earned that territory. So what you see there, you see usually bad guy on bad guy violence. Rarely is that focused at innocent people, but on a daily basis, innocent people are getting shot, right? You hear the stories about the 6-year-old, you know, in his house playing with his Matchbox cars and he gets shot in the head from a stray bullet from 2 idiots shooting it out in the street. Unfortunately, Don, that is absolutely not dipping. Wow. It's one of DEA's biggest concerns is violence. One of the things that we're really pushing now, you know, we have an initiative. It's called Domestic Cartel Initiative, and it's focused on violent drug traffickers in all over the United States. And we're pushing money, we're pushing assets to those cities and those areas that ask for that assistance. So it's something we're like I said, right? We're trying to wear 15 hats at once. The opioid thing is huge. The violence thing is huge. Heroin is huge. The dark web is huge. We're not big enough to knock out every one of those, but assets are being deployed in all of those areas. I don't want anyone to think that we're giving up on one thing to focus on another. That's not true. We're pretty damn good at this, and I'm really proud of the people that I've worked with for 26 years in DEA and at ATF and HSI and FBI and here at Hawaii PD and Honolulu PD, excuse me, and all the 5 islands that I cover here in the Honolulu Sheriff's Office. These are dedicated men and women, you know, that get up in the morning and try to go to work and try to do the right thing every day. So unfortunately, the short answer to that is, Don, no, it is not getting better. It's probably getting worse. I haven't seen the statistics. Chicago is at all-time highs over the last 3 or 4 years. It's out of control in Chicago. I know the new DEA agent, the special agent in charge that just went to Chicago. He's an outstanding guy. I'm sure he's going to try to get his hands on this. But again, we as an agency, we can't do it alone, obviously. You know, we have great partners. And I know I've said that a bunch, but people just think it's just DEA. It's not. We're not big enough to do this alone. We're very much of a task force mentality. We're trying to go after the biggest and baddest. Our job is to, you know, identify, disrupt, and dismantle drug trafficking organizations. We do that on a daily basis. You know, we don't get out on TV and say every day what we did. But the American people should know that we are out there. We are making a difference. Are we winning the drug war? I can't say we're doing that. But we're sure as hell winning some battles. And we're trying to focus on on violence. Like I said, we have some initiatives right now that are very focused on violence in inner cities and in urban and rural areas of the U.S. So unfortunately, I can't tell you the answer is good there, Don. It's not good. It's as bad as it's ever been, or probably getting worse in some cities, especially Chicago.
All right. Well, listen, John, Derek, do you have any more questions? I mean, I feel like we can go on for another 4 hours right now, but.
Well, I know I talked to John about, we could do another one of these in a couple of months and follow up, but also get into some other areas as well.
Let me say something to you guys. So people say opioid crisis. What the hell are you guys talking about, opioid crisis? I don't see it. I don't see it in my neighborhood. I'm going to give you some stats, right? So between 2006 and 2016, commercial distributors delivered enormous amounts of oxycodone and hydrocodone to 2 pharmacies in West Virginia, rural West Virginia, right? One was called Tug Valley Pharmacy, and the other one was called Hurley Pharmacy. Those 2 pharmacies are 0.2 miles apart, so 1/5 of a mile from each other. The population of those areas is about 3,200 people. Well, they delivered 21 million oxy pills in 10 years to a population of 3,000 people. So show me where the due diligence was on the pharmaceutical end of that. Not only on the pharmacy side, but on the distributor side and on the wholesale maker of those drugs. 20 million pills to 3,200 people over a 10-year period. And there's another statistic. So between 2007 and 2012, enough pain pills were sent to the state of West Virginia to supply every man, woman, and child with 433 pills each. So when you say there's a chain issue here, that's kind of what we're trying to fight, right? It's endemic. It's built into the system that, what's wrong with that? So now I think our eyes are awake to this, and you're going to see in the very near future, you're going to see some lawsuits coming out that the attorney generals of about 20 or 25 states are putting together. It's going to be against those pharmaceutical companies. It's going to be against those distributing companies saying, hey, wait a minute. Are you telling me that you didn't notice this, that you sent 20 million pills to a town of 3,000 people over a 10-year period? That didn't pop up on your radar as, hey, something's probably wrong here?
Yeah, that's crazy.
So that's a great statistic for kind of what we're talking about when we say crisis.
Awesome. Well, not awesome, but you know what I mean. It's just
I got you. It's sad. It's alarming, and it really needs to the light of day needs to be shown on this.
Well, this type of education, I think, is going to help, and it's going to inform a lot of people, and it's.
And I want to thank you guys, man. Thanks for making time for this, because I know your podcast is dedicated to health and fitness, and this isn't exactly in that, but it's a big part of it, man. And if you can, hopefully the people that listen to your podcast, obviously they're into health and fitness, they're trying to educate themselves. I would ask anybody out there listening, please push this out to your folks. Please get on www.dea.gov. It's Drug Enforcement Administration, www.dea.gov. And we have all kinds of stuff in there to educate, that you can print, that you can distribute. DEA has a program called DEA 360, which is an education outreach that we're trying to do in some of the areas that have been overwrought with opioid abuse. So please look at those if you're interested in this. And I want to thank Derek and Don very, very much for allowing me to try to get the message out there. And I appreciate what you guys are doing, for the people of America as well.
Well, I'm sure Derek will agree with me, but we definitely need more human beings like yourself out there. And we can't thank you enough for this lifelong, battle, this lifelong commitment that you've made to our country and to everyone. So thank you so much. And listen, I'm already looking forward to having you on again. So hopefully we can do that again soon.
Hopefully you can do that, brother. Good time. And I hope that next time I'm in New York, I'll look you up, man.
You got to come by. Please do so. Would love that.
I will. So I will.
Definitely.
Thanks.
I'll see you very soon too, John.
All right, brother. Take care, guys. Be safe.
Thanks,
Take
Derek.
care. Thanks, guys.